Welcome to the Mujeres Create Podcast. I'm Jessie, your host, and we're here to celebrate your limitless creative power. It's time to awaken your magic and manifest your wildest dreams. Join us for this next conversation. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie. I'm the host and creator of the Mujeres Create Podcast. I wanted to do an episode to tell you more about me. I realized that I launched the podcast and I jumped right into interviews, which is amazing. But I figured people listening might want to know more about who I am, and I just wanted to tell you. So, my full name is Yesenia. Living in the United States, one of the things that happens often is that people mispronounce my name. So, over the years, I have gotten used to people calling me Jessie, which is easier and short for Yesenia, or sometimes in the corporate environment, it's easy for people to just call me Yes. And I definitely prefer that people call me Jessie or Yes rather than misspell my name. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. My family and I are from San Francisco de Macorís, which is in the center of the country of DR. And we come from very humble beginnings. It's a topic that I will cover significantly on the podcast because it's really who I am as a person, where I come from. We come from a campo, we call it campo in DR, called La Joya. I was born in the campo, and I think as I was a 1 or 2 years old, my family moved to the town, San Francisco. So that's where I come from. I have a very large family. I'm the oldest of 7 siblings. And in my family, on my dad's side of the family, I am the oldest daughter, the first granddaughter, the first niece, the first cousin, the first everything. And if you know anything about being the first, I have both a lot of privilege because my family got to experience all of those milestones with me first. And I also got to experience them raising me, obviously, the first child in the family, with their mistakes and all of it. But very lucky and very fortunate that I also experienced a lot of love from my family, from my tias, from my tios, my parents, my grandparents. On my mom's side of the family, is a little bit older. So I'm not the oldest. I am probably in the middle. I have a lot of cousins that are a lot older than me, but it's also a large family. Altogether, I have about 60 first cousins that I know of. And, that means that we're often in family gatherings, celebrating birthdays and weddings and baptisms and you name it. There's always a lot to celebrate in my family, which I'm so grateful for. And, I'm very close to both sides of my family. So I'm always at a lot of these events. Again, very lucky. Most of my family immigrated to New York City in the 80s. In the early 80s, I think some of them in the late 70s. And most of them moved to New York City, to Brooklyn, to Queens, to Washington Heights, the Bronx, all over the city. And when I immigrated in 1992 at the age of 11, I immigrated with my dad, my sister. My dad had already been here since, I think, 87. So a couple years later, he brought my sister and I to New York to live with him. My mom and my brother stayed back in the DR. My parents are separated. But when I came over to New York, we were living in Jamaica, Queens. That's where we moved to. So when I got here, I was placed in the 6th grade. And at the time in Jamaica, Queens, more closer to Briarwood, there was no bilingual education at the school that I was at, PS 117. So I was placed in a monolingual, fully speaking class, an English class. And that was my first taste of, I think, being an immigrant in this country. not speaking the language, facing real barriers, not understanding what I was supposed to do in class. A lot of the kids in that class, I think there were few Latino kids, but they were fully English speaking. They definitely didn't have the challenge that I had. So I basically had to fend for myself a lot of the times in that class. And although it was very hard for me to deal with that at a young age, same for my sister, although my sister's teacher knew a little bit of Spanish. So she had an easier time on the fifth grade. But I think that those experiences really just allowed me to push through and start to become that resilient person I believe I am. By the time I got to the seventh and eighth grade, I was moved to another school, PS 217. And in that school, they were offering bilingual classes. So I was placed in a bilingual class where I had other Latino kids also trying to learn the language. So it was easier for me. And the gift of not having that bilingual education the first year, I think just pushed me to learn English quicker, to understand. I think they call it baptism by fire in some cases. So it was really a blessing in the end. So 217 was the junior high school I went to. Then I went to John Bound High School in Flushing. Then I went to the CUNY College of Staten Island, a CUNY school in New York City. And that's another first gen experience. As the oldest daughter in my family, I had the privilege of being the one to pave the way for my other siblings, for a lot of my cousins. And, navigating that college experience was very new, very interesting. My immigrant parents definitely did not know how to guide me in that process. And this is where I had to figure it out for myself. And I did it. I put myself through school 4 years. I studied communications and publication design. Truthfully, when I chose that major, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew I had to choose a major, but I couldn't think of a more suitable degree for me because I absolutely have loved the career path that degree led me to. While I was in college, I had the privilege of finding a really cool internship for a very small cable network that was getting started by NBC and Telemundo. The cable network was called Mundos Television. I had my internship there. Lucky for me, I was graduating that year. They had a position open for a sales assistant role. I was making $28,000 a year. This was 2004. And I was so thrilled to have that opportunity to be able to walk in and work for a major television network. The way that happened was very interesting. Mundos was an independent cable network. Telemundo, who's a bigger cable network, bought out Mundos, but then NBC bought out Telemundo. So by way of two acquisitions, I went from interning at a very small cable network to working at one of the biggest television networks in the United States. So I feel like that was the first time that I really felt, okay, I'm really lucky to have landed this job. And, that role kind of led me to an amazing career path in media, marketing, sales, which I love talking about because for 22 years I got to work in some of the coolest companies. Got to create an amazing network of people that I work with, and a lot of them have become friends and feel like family. After NBC and Telemundo and Mundos, I was there for 8 years. A lot of learnings that I want to share with everybody. So those episodes are definitely coming. After 8 years at NBC, Telemundo, Mundos, I was recruited by Hulu. At the time, this was 2011. I was browsing and I happened to be watching a clip from Hulu. I think it was Modern Family. And I said to myself, wow, wouldn't it be cool to work at that company? And, I believe in manifestations. I think that day I manifested that job at Hulu because a few weeks later, I found myself having a job interview at Hulu and getting that job. So after 8 years, I was recruited by Hulu and got to work at Hulu. And I was there for almost 5 years. And this is where that was one of probably the best job I've ever had. When I got to Hulu, it was a very much a startup company, tech company, media company. Going from my traditional television, which was Telemundo, to digital, very different. The tech space is completely different than media. I'd love to talk about that too. That's definitely a huge topic of interest for me. How I navigated the tech environment. While there were a lot of challenges there, I think, that job was definitely my favorite of all the jobs I've ever had. And it definitely pushed me to be better, to learn more, to grow, to expand, to be this independent media person that I became. Then, after almost 5 years at Hulu, I was recruited by Google. One day, a Hulu colleague was packing up his desk because he had just been hired at Google. I looked at him and I said, "Hey, where are you going?" And he tells me, "I'm going to Google. I just got a job there." And then I looked at him and I said, "Wow, congratulations." Inside, I thought to myself, I'm going to go and follow him to Google. I'm going to work there too. And I think I also manifested that because literally, I think a year later, I was working there at Google on the same team that he was at. Google was definitely a different story, a lot of challenges. And I love to talk about those challenges in tech because it really pushed me so far out of my comfort zone. It was definitely an experience that I'll never forget for many reasons. There was a lot of good, Google comes with a lot of prestige, a lot of perks, really good pay, really good access and experiences. When you tell people that you work at Google, people light up and they look up to you and they, they automatically assume that you're very smart, that you're very lucky. But I felt everything but smart and lucky. I was having a really hard time there. I struggled with this imposter syndrome, so many things that happened. I was working in a very tough, toxic team environment that eventually led me to a really bad burnout in 2018. We talk a lot about that too, because it's one of those experiences that marked my life and my corporate environment, the person that I have become and so focused on wellness. So those years at Google, there's a lot of learning that I want to just talk to people about, whoever's looking to get into the tech space and they just want to know how to prepare themselves. I definitely want to talk about that. So Google lasted for 3 years and 3 months, and I think 5 days and 10 hours. It was definitely an experience that I really wanted to get out of. I ended up going from Google to iHeartMedia, which is a audio company, more of a traditional media company. And after I went from Google to iHeartMedia, I definitely felt a huge sense of relief because I just felt like I could be myself again. I found really great people who just felt a little bit more human and a little bit more welcoming. And, I got there in 2019. And shortly after getting there, the pandemic happened and a lot of things changed in the workplace. At the beginning of that experience, I was very happy with my transition, but the pandemic changed everything. I think the dynamics of the workplace, the dynamics of the company changed so drastically. I was only able to stay there for almost 4 years. I changed roles from sales to diversity and inclusion. That created new challenges for me, and I definitely want to talk about that too. But my time at iHeartMedia only lasted 3 years and like 7 months. It didn't feel like it was that long, but because the pandemic years, it definitely felt like they went very fast, but at the same time, they went very slow. Um, so after that culmination at iHeartMedia, I took a sabbatical. I felt like it was time for me to take a break and do different things. I had felt like calling for change, to move into work that was a little bit more purposeful, work that I was kind of helping someone, helping the world. I just felt like I needed to do something different. A career in advertising, sales, and media is very meaningful. And I definitely am so grateful and fortunate that I got to experience those things. But I felt like for a long time I had been yearning for more meaning, for different experiences. So I took a sabbatical, and in January of 2024, I went back into media as a consultant, as an independent worker. I wasn't ready to jump into corporate again. I felt like I wanted to experience some freedom. I wanted to experience some type of flexibility. I did not want to go back into the office. I did not want to have a boss. I did not want to feel constrained with my ideas. So I felt like it was time for me to just be independent, and consulting was a way for me to do that. I ended up doing consulting for media companies, small media companies that were emerging in 2024. I did that for about a year and 3 months. And I came to a point where I felt like my time as a media salesperson, a marketing person, really came to an end. This is really where I wanted to just completely shift. And it wasn't easy for me to do that so drastically. I really needed to take my time. And I think that year that I spent consulting allowed me to reflect on the things that I wanted to do and the things that I no longer wanted to do. So I decided to completely leave the media space in March of this year, March 2025. And in that time, and even before March 2025, I had been planning this podcast, been, thinking about what can I do. So my career in media, sales, marketing, after 22 years, completely shifted and pivoted. And that's something that I love to talk about as well. And I know there's a lot of people, especially after the pandemic, people wanting to look for change, people looking to do different things, people looking to do more purposeful work. And so, if I can assist anyone in that journey, I definitely want to be able to do that. Shifting into my personal life, there's also a lot of topics that I want to cover. I am very passionate about health and wellness. And this journey has been marked by a few things that have happened in my life. In 2015, I donated a kidney to my father. And as I was going through that journey, I understood the importance of health, of maintaining good health, of some of the challenges that really affect Latino and Black communities from a health perspective. Our diet, our habits, some of the traumatic events in our lives. All of these things really do affect us in so many ways. And as I was going through that surgery journey with my father, I got to understand that truly the most precious thing we have is our health. And sometimes when we're younger, we don't really appreciate health and we don't take care of ourselves. So for 10 years, I've been very conscious about health and wellness. You know, Another thing that happened more recently, is in April of 2024, I underwent an unexpected partial hysterectomy. At the time, I was, you know, planning to have a baby with my husband, and for some reason, it wasn't happening. I go to the doctor, and I experience a lot of bias, a lot of gaslighting, and I decided to take matters into my own hands and go to the Dominican Republic and find a trusted doctor. That experience led me to a hysterectomy. And that hysterectomy led me to on this path of not only healing, but on this path of understanding my feminine power, understanding where that sat, understanding my identity as a woman, and what life looked like now with this, obviously with with this new development in my life, and obviously my relationship. And so that journey has really been a huge marker for me, not only in terms of what I prioritize in life, how I see life, how I value myself as a woman, I think more importantly, how I see women. I see women, we are so resilient. We are truly big creators in our lives. And I want to tell those stories. I definitely want to talk about the hysterectomy journey, that donor journey that I had with my father. These are big topics in our community. I want to talk about health. I want to talk about wellness. I want to talk about stress. I want to talk about how we sometimes lose sight of our health, our wellness, our peace of mind, and how we sometimes let career and personal circumstances take us so far away from taking care of ourselves and paying attention to our bodies, listening to our bodies, listening to our intuition, listening to our voice. I want to talk about all of those topics. I think is very important for women and for men. And so those two health experiences have put me on this path of really trying to understand who we are, who I am as a woman, understand my spirit, understand my soul's purpose. I've gone into modalities like sound meditation, yoga, understanding frequencies and understanding low frequencies and high frequencies, and how do we read energy from not only people, from environments, from situations, from jobs. All of those topics are very important to me, and things are that I want to talk about. And I think as a Latina woman who is also Afro Latina, and I celebrate all of my intersecting identities. Coming from the Dominican Republic, large part of our country is Black. Essentially, we come from Black ancestry, African ancestry, Indigenous ancestry, some European ancestry. So, understanding and uncovering all of that is a huge passion point for me. In fact, my entire career has been built on multicultural marketing, and the gift of that has been just being able to talk about culture, understand culture, thinking about the multicultural consumer, which is Latino, Black, Asian, LGBT, constantly in meetings with clients, with people. I'm having these conversations about our demographics, about what does the Latino consumer look like. And now that I'm creating this podcast, talking about culture is something that you will see here very consistently on the episodes. I'm very passionate about culture. I think the aspect of culture just brings so much uniqueness and richness to any conversation. And so I love to explore those topics with my guests. I am looking out for women who have a cultural background, or who can tell me and share some very unique cultural experiences and stories. So that will be found on my podcast episodes very frequently. And it's something I love talking about. Truly, the mission of Mujeres Create, what I want to do is provide a platform for women and for men, because if there's one thing I am so sure of is that when women and men work together, support each other, heal, have constructive conversations, we really are just making this a better world. And so it is really to our benefit to support each other, to understand each other, to love each other, and to share together, to create together. And so, this podcast is not just for women; it's for anyone who wants to listen, who wants to be inspired, who wants to create. One thing that I have explored through my hysterectomy journey is, for women, the uterus is, or the womb, however you want to call it, this is the center of her creation, her power to create life. But this area of the body also holds the the energy of manifestation, the energy of creation, of creativity, of personal power. And so for me, being marked by my hysterectomy, learning about all of those things and appreciating all those topics at a deeper level has been so important, so, life changing. And so I want to bring women and men who are going beyond limitations, taking down barriers, growing into resilient beings, not giving up. I want to interview women who are mothers, women who are not mothers, women who just have an interesting story to tell, a story of creation, of love, of believing in themselves. And I think I also want women to come to the show and feel supported, feel love, feel understood, feel seen, feel celebrated. I want to bring all of those interesting stories that, people want to be inspired by. I definitely think that the state of the world right now is there's so much chaos, there's so much pain, so much suffering, so much change, um, just so many things that are different, that have changed for all of us, that it's very easy to lose hope. It's very easy to just want to give up. It's very easy to be afraid to look at the news, look on social media. But, I think the beauty of the state that we're in is that humanity always stands up to create change, to create better conditions. If there's one thing I know for sure is that this is when we rise. This is when we stand up for ourselves and our communities, our countries, our world, and we push for better. And I want this podcast to be hopeful in that way. And I want my listeners to share feedback and tell me what stories they want to listen to. Where do they want to go? I want this to be a global movement. Mujeres Create. Let's make this a global movement. And last thing I'll say is that the support of people liking, sharing, commenting, sending a text message, sending an email, reposting, listening, it just means everything. So if you have been one of those people that have taken the time to go on my Instagram page, on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or one of the podcast platforms and engage with my content in any way, shape, or form, I just want to say thank you. I'm definitely striving to make this podcast better every day. I am not a podcast expert. I'm not a social media manager expert. I do all my editings, I do all my posts. And sometimes I definitely cringe when I look at myself. It's not easy for me to step out of my comfort zone, but I feel in my heart that this is the work that I need to be doing. And I'm very excited and happy to be doing this work. And it is definitely easier to do the work when you see people are supporting you. So I just wanted to say thank you. And if you're stopping by for the first time, welcome. I hope you find this to be a good place for you to spend 30, 45, 60 minutes with every single week. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you on the next conversation. Cuídense. Thank you for listening to the Mujeres Create Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode and don't forget to share the wisdom with other mujeres.